All right, guys, so I broke up the video because I didn't want one long video. So what we will talk about now is we're gonna wrap up. No, at least we'll do some of this topic, and then we will finish up next week with postmodern career counseling and solution focused. So from beginning. All right, so postmodern theory. So to close off on this, now we have the contextualist theory of career, of the complexity, chaos, and nonlinear. And then next week we'll finish up with postmodern career counseling and solution-focused brief career counseling. Just as what the title of this one is in terms of contextualist theory. Just as the name states, that's what it is about. And it falls in line with the postmodern theory, which looks at the how, the why, and looking at the background, etc., etc. So this theory was a little bit more rougher than the others in terms of stating that trait and factor theory is inaccurate. Not so sure about that. But according to them, as we know, trait and factor looks at the characteristics, the interests, the values, and abilities, and it have a whole heap of merit, because we are attracted to careers based on our interests, values, and abilities. According to this theory, we can only understand people within the environment. And this is very important to understand. And it's a valid approach in terms of understanding how people choose their career and understanding how they come about in terms of their career decision making. What this contextualist theory tends to state is that actions taken in regards to career involve goal-oriented series of behavior that are guided by the individual and social context. When in other sense, what this is saying is that you can't just take things on face value. You can't just assess people on face value. You cannot assess people's behavior on face value. You have to look at the context of their environment, etc. It states that we can look at people's context based on unobservable behavior, internal processes that cannot be observed, and the meaning and or results as interpreted by individuals and others who observed the action, right? What this theory states is that if it is you're going to talk to a client about how they choose their career, about their behaviors, about their decision-making, etc., you have to look at the context in which they are, their environment, how they're brought up, how they interpret that particular reality. Remember, I'm always telling you that when you have a sibling in the same household, same parents, same experience, but they have two different perceptions of reality. And when one chooses to be a doctor, and you're looking at the context of why they chose to be a doctor, you realize that the family member was sick, they had to be nursing them, etc., etc. So they chose a career in medicine. That is the context of their environment and their perception. Whereas their sibling will choose business because what? They're tired for say hospital. It's not like they don't have any empathy, but growing up in terms of their context and environment, they just don't want to see another hospital, at least not in terms of their career. And too much hospital, right? And it looks at what this highlights is that the environment, which is the context, groom them for the careers that they are having. And they have two different perception and meaning affiliated to what happened in their life. So one decides to go in the medical field, one decides to say, yo, see too much doctors, too much nurse, too much medicine, I like the smell of hospital, I go through this too much with the family. business it is. And when you talk to somebody and look at the context of their upbringing, then you understand. Now, before I started recording, I was in a meeting with my council members, my student council members. And there was a young couple. I was talking to them because I used to call them toxic because every minute they're feuding. And when you sit down and listen to them, I sat down and listened to them today, told them to, I mean, if you're not compatible, there's nothing wrong with that. And I said to the young man, as an outsider, you always look like you're overshadowing your girlfriend because he has a very strong personality. And she was complaining that he keeps shutting down her ideas, etc. And she got emotional, and he kept on, like, if you bring up something that he does, he keeps saying but, so he's apologizing, but. And when you sit down and listen to their background, you understand why they are the way they are. And this is an example of context. He's always an overthink, and I tell him that sometimes he needs to let go things, and he needs to let go things and live in the moment sometimes. And it so happens that he explained to me that his sister is some big shot, his other brother is some big shot. So there's always this pressure for him to be good academically. So he's always in his head trying to figure out how to outshine and show up, and and it got so bad. I even said to him the other day, I said, you're gonna lose your girl, because he's telling me that he wanted to discuss plans for the 2023-2024 academic year and the plans he had. And him and her are supposed to meet and discuss it. And she come and try and close, and he got upset. And the man said to me, the girl put on a battery rider. I said, Jenna, the woman put on a battery rider and you begs because you want to discuss guilt things and you're not on chairperson yet. And it's when he's talking to me today about the pressures of having to be good, you understand the context. And then now, because of that, it's affecting her because she feels alone, even though she's with him, and just get the sense that she's always wrong. And when I listen to her story, it's the same thing that is happening in her household. And she said she can't feel alone at home and feeling like she is the root of all problems, end up being the same thing in our relationship. And just talking to them, you realize that context is everything. You can't take people at face value and not understand the environment in which they grew up and the perception of reality that they have interpreted from their experiences, right? Now, interpretations are influenced by a lot of things. It is influenced by gender, culture of the individual, the different mindsets, the different experiences, the different exposure. And that alone, you have to delve deep sometimes when you're dealing with a client. You have to understand the context. Why is it? So sometimes you're going to encounter some difficult clients that they're not accessing the information properly and they have a negative outcome. And sometimes we get a little bit frustrated with them and we want them to see their own potential. But then when you take into context their environment and what they perceive as their reality, then it gives a different understanding of what they are going through, right? So according to the contextualist theory, just as postmodern theory does, we construct our narratives based on the interpretations of life events that pertain to our career, right? These narratives will be constructed based on interpretations of events that led to their career. For example, I could be sickly And my interpretation of me being sickly is that I need to do more research in the medical field. And I end up doing research in the medical field. Another context could be growing up. You never have much food. So that when you grow up, you have an appreciation for food. So you become a food chemist, you become a quality control person, you become a chef because you appreciate food based on growing up. You didn't have much food. So what you need to do as a career development specialist is to assist your clients to project their narratives, what they have constructed based on their context into future contexts. So based on how you grow up, based on your environment, based on what you go through, how does this influence your career decision? How does this influence your future career decision making? And it all boils down to how it is they narrate their story, what is the perception that they get, what was their context. And this is where trait and factor is totally different in terms of postmodern theory. It goes deeper. It tries to understand what was happening in your environment. What is the context? You know, sometimes when you hear one little snippet of an interview and you hear somebody say, but what was the context of the whole conversation for that part to come out? You understand? And that is exactly what he's talking about. You hear this little snippet, you see this one piece of person, you see this one decision, and you want to take on the whole concept so that you understand where the person is coming from, or you understand how they made their decisions, right? So people in general create a meaning, create perceptions, create understanding based on the meaning of their past memories, present memories, future experience, present aspirations and actions. So there are two primary tenets of this theory, and try to remember this for your exam. Tenets simply mean main principles, right? Behavior is caused by the social context in which the behavior occurs, right? So you see a child out the road, and we do this all the time. Like we see a child misbehaving, and what we say to ourselves is, I saw them a behave, or them see them parents behave at their yard, or them a do them yard or road. This is exactly what this means. Behavior is caused the social context in which the behavior occurred. Reality is a matter of perception. And this simply means everybody have their own perception of one reality based on exposure and experience. Me and Shireen can have the same experience where we in a car in a crash, and we have two different perceptions of the reality. One from the perception of a driver, one as the perception of a passenger. And it really doesn't mean the perceptions are wrong. Each perception and each reality is created based on our mindset or reality or culture, or bringing our environment, right? So one of the things that we have to do as career counselors is explore the meanings that clients have created. And this in turn, we may not agree with the meaning that they have come up with, but we can't downplay the meaning that they have created. You know, when we say we can agree to disagree, you understand where they're coming from, but you know, must agree with it. You understand, say, the guy who shoot up the school was being bullied and but they still not agree with the fact that him shoot up the school. But when you look at the context, you say, but he was pushed, but at the same time, you still not agree. That's basically what context. We're understanding how behaviors come about, how career decision making came about, based on environment and upbringing and things that are around us while we're growing up, exposure, experience, etc. Now, one of the strengths of the contextualist theory is that it takes into consideration the client's perspective. You can't force your perspective on the client. You can't take another man's perspective and force on a client. You're dealing with individual things. So is the client's perception, is the client's reality that will be the focus. What is it they took from experiences that they have had in their life? Weakness, it is difficult to research because the process is at least as important as the outcome, and most of the process is internal to the client. Perception is always internal, always opinion, always how we process what we have seen or experienced, and that is an internal thing, and that is the only weakness that we have with this one. Quite simple, quite straightforward. You just know, so when you do some career counseling and you're trying to understand how they came about some decisions or how they came about some realities, you have to take in consideration their background, their environment, their exposure, their experience. That they get an idea of what developed this particular perception, this particular reality, and how do you work with them. But it's taking on a holistic approach, whereas the career construction look at the history of your vocational experience to create themes, etc. The contextual theory is looking at your context, your whole context, looking at your upbringing, your mindset, how you interpreted something, your reality, how you came up with it. And at the end of the day, that will give you an idea of how they came up with the decisions that they have made. No two clients will have the same perception. They may have same experiences, but different realities and perception of their own reality. And we have to take a holistic approach when we are dealing with them. All right. From current slide. Now we're going to look at complexity, chaos, and nonlinear dynamics. Now, of course, this is a postmodern theory. And what this look at is that everything that we do in our life is connected in some way. Things that we have done in the past will affect future decisions, future consequences, things that we may see that don't seem connected in some way, some shape, some form. And in this particular model, what it does is that it highlights or it postulates, or one of the tenets is that career is an adaptive entity, right? So what it says is that it has the ability to maintain themselves even though their shape and components may change, which is the clients. It's an open system, taking and exporting energy to the environment. Parts of networks engaging in interchange of resources, and part of these other entities that are intertwined throughout our life is career, family, and these they call fractals. All right. Sorry guys, I don't know, something in the office is triggering my silence. All right, so in terms of career is an adaptive entity, what it really means is it's dynamic and ever changing, and this we know. There are certain things that happen that makes our career ever changing in terms of external factors, internal factors. It could be global factors or changes in the organization itself, changes in the industry. Going through transition, seeking fitness peak that maximizes chances of survival. And it behaves in nonlinear ways. And what this means is a tying with, in terms of happenstance, in that there's no straight line. There are multiple and unexplainable events that impose on the functioning of these career development, right? Reacting so that small changes can bring about large effects. So what the complexity and chaos talks about is there are small changes that will happen in your career plan, in your career goal, in your vocational life, in your experience, in your exposure. But how do you react to even the smallest change to bring about a massive effect, a significant effect, right? Moving through transitions, they may be strained by attractors, fractals, creating new fractals as they move through transitions. And this is the family, the career, etc., creating additional drama. Fractal existing only as part of the nested reality of the universe, interdependent, spiritually is experiencing this unity with the universe. Now, what the key elements of complexity, after all of that spirituality and interconnectedness and all these things, the key elements, our careers are frequently subject to chance events. Research has indicated that 70% of people experience chance events that impact their lives. So, as I said, this is like a more interdynamic version of happenstance, where it talks about the fact that everything is connected. Everything that we do, that we don't do, is connected. Different elements, fractals, will affect our career decision making, etc. Right? And how do we make a great impact with a small change in our life? Our careers are subject to nonlinear change, no straight line. Sometimes small steps have profound outcomes. And that's one of the reasons why I always tell my students, when you're doing your resume, you don't have much work experience. If you work one day down at the assembly hall, put it on. It may seem like a small step, a small work experience, but it will have a positive outcome. A lot of people don't realize that sometimes when a company say 1 year experience, I don't mean 1 year continuous experience, but at least all of the different work experience you have add up to a year. You understand? Our careers are subject to continual change. Sometimes we experience a slow shift that results in us drifting off course, or sometimes our careers have dramatic changes when turned upside down, right? Using myself again, my career switched to include student services. It was not a part of the plan. I was always in career development. I was always student centered, although it's a part of student services. This whole shift in encompassing more in terms of responsibilities, etc., has shifted everything for me. I'm tired now. I have more responsibility. I travel back and forth. I have worry about my child, etc., etc. But I'm trying to embrace this career change because it's a dramatic change for me. And the dramatic change doesn't only have to do with the job responsibilities and the career itself, but the physical and the geographic change and the adjustments that you have to make in your life itself, right? Now, I've always told you that any theory that we use, apply it to yourself. Figure out what kind of chaos and chance event that you had in your life that uproot your career plan totally, or there was a small change and you made a great impact with that small change, right? It looks at the whole thing of complexity and unpredictability and sensitivity to change, and the fact that our career paths as individuals is not a straight line. It highlights the fact that we need to incorporate the possibility of change. And as you can realize, with complexity chaos, yes, it talks about chance events, but the main word for it is change. Whereas with happenstance, it looks at chance, right? So the possibility of change, of unforeseen circumstances, alternate outcomes in your career plans, you know? It's being aware that no matter how small your decision is, it can have a major impact on your career goal, right? When you're applying chaos theory now, you must adopt the perspective that career development is a process, just like with happenstance, a lifelong process. And things are going to be constantly changing, whether it's a life dynamics, whether it's, you know, the environment. And what is going to happen is that a lot of these forces in the environment, in the universe, will develop chance events and changes in your life, right? You have to apply inductive and deductive reasoning to avoid, must be avoided, sorry. Inductive and deductive reasoning must be avoided for nonlinear abductive reasoning that deals with patterns and relationship and accepts the premise that all knowledge is open to be questioned. Not take any, there's no definite. In this particular theory, you have to be open-minded. You have to be ready for questions and the changes and identifying, just like with the construction theory, identifying the patterns and the themes and linking past events and how they affect what is happening with you now. When you're considering past decisions, they should be considered in the context in which they are made. So as you can see with complexity chaos, it is including the career construction theory, it is including happenstance, it is including contextual theory, right? Because it is highlighting that different decisions will affect future decisions. It's showing you that the universe is interconnected. It's telling you about the different changes that may happen in the environment that will affect your career. And it is looking at the fact that your context, none of this can be done without the context. So yes, you make a decision, a small decision that makes a major outcome, but within that particular context, maybe that was the only decision you could have made, right? So now, in terms of chaos theory, clients must be encouraged to identify the constraints in their system, right? So there are 3 constraints. Point attractors are oriented to a single goal, nothing else. Pendulum attractor, which is torn between 2 options, influences our choices. The torus attractor, which is more complex and you have repetitive patterns that yield unacceptable outcomes. And the 4th one is the strange attractor, where it really doesn't include repetitive patterns. All right. I don't think I want to go into postmodern tonight. We can go into postmodern career counseling, which is encapsulating everything that we have spoken about. And then we'll look at solution-focused counseling, which will finish up our module 4, and we will be set. So we'll have a class next week that addresses those things. But as you can see, based on complex chaos, and we spoke about, what was that one we spoke about? For me, I'm getting old. Or is tired. Contextualist theory, where we talk about helping our clients, but looking at the context in terms of environment, looking at how they grew up, how is it they made a particular decision based on their perception of their reality and their interpretation of their reality. All right. So we'll talk about the final 2, which is short and easy to understand. And that will be the end for next week. Bye.